Hi, friends. I'm Sarah Jo Strawberry, and today I just want to talk about my favorite movie, Jim Henson's Labyrinth. And one of everyone's favorite movies, one of the most beloved films in the world, The Wizard of Oz. Specifically, I want to talk about how these two movies are connected and why I believe they are meant to be set in the same universe. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Daddy, get me out of here. I'm on the ground. Well, about a place for nothing ever hurts again. Daddy, get me out of here.
It's no secret that Jim Henson's 1986 fantasy film Labyrinth is heavily influenced and inspired by coming of age stories of a young girl on a journey like The Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland. In fact, early on in the film, we see a shot panning over Sarah's bedroom, Sarah being our Dorothy of Labyrinth, and there is a stack of books that includes The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland, among other children's fantasy books. But as I said at the top, not only is Labyrinth inspired by The Wizard of Oz, but quite possibly meant to be set in the same universe, with Labyrinth drawing its setting from a line in the song Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. That line being, when the Munchkins cry in jubilation, she's gone where the goblins go below. The Wicked Witch is dead. In Labyrinth, the Goblin City and the Labyrinth itself are in a realm known as the Underground. The lyrics of the opening song of Labyrinth, also called Underground, describe this land. But down in the underground, you'll find someone true. Down in the underground, a land serene, a crystal moon. It's only forever, it's not long at all. The lost and lonely, that's underground, underground. So in The Wizard of Oz, the Munchkins are describing the witch dying and going to hell. Hell being a place underground where there are goblins, where the goblins go. In Labyrinth, underground is the realm of the goblins. We, as the audience, go to the underground to meet the goblins, go to the goblin city. It's conceivable that the underground, as well as some of Labyrinth's story itself, are derived from depictions of the underworld in Greek mythology. Even the names underground and underworld are very similar. Another coming-of-age story that Labyrinth may be drawing from is the Greek myth of Hades and Persephone. And there are also some similarities between the myth of Persephone and the Wizard of Oz. But first, let's take a look at the similarities in the plots of these two movies, as well as the interesting similarities in how these movies were made. To start looking at the plot parallels, both films can be described as a coming-of-age story of a young girl who is transported directly from her home to another world. She must travel a brick pathway toward a grand city with the goal of reuniting with a family member and returning home, but needs the assistance of the magical leader of this strange world, who is from the girls' world if you accept the Labyrinth Acadia comics as canon. Along the way, she gradually gathers 3 companions. From the start of her journey, the antagonist keeps tabs on the girl's progress via a crystal ball. Early in her journey, the antagonist appears in person to try and stop the girl, but she persists. Later, the antagonist, from their castle, uses their magic to again try and stop the girl from reaching the city by making her fall asleep. She ultimately reaches the city and meets the leader, who uses visual trickery. She faces the antagonist by herself, and ultimately, the girl defeats the antagonist, and following a realization of self-power, she is returned home. It ends with her in her room, seeing the people she encountered in the other world. Also, there are dogs, and someone gets a perm.
And I got a permanent just for the occasion.
Both films also employed a similar use of practical effects, and I would like to argue a similar use of lack of color. Many of the visual choices in The Wizard of Oz stemmed from MGM's desire to show off their Technicolor technology, including starting the film in black and white, which makes Dorothy's arrival in Oz a colorful, magical world all the more magical. The simplistic opening titles of Labyrinth, text on a black background with a CGI owl swooping in and out occasionally, create a similar sense of sensory deprivation. It's as if the titles submerge us in darkness and prepare us to enter an entirely new world unfamiliar to our own. Similar to MGM wanting to show off their Technicolor technology, the CGI owl in Labyrinth's opening credits are the first use of a fully CGI animated animal in film. Looking at how these two films were made, they could best be described as having been cobbled together, with The Wizard of Oz being cobbled together in the worst possible way. The production of The Wizard of Oz was infamously fraught with countless issues that could be traced back to the film suffering from too many cooks in the kitchen.
It takes a lot to make a stew.
Many key crew members were changed throughout production. For example, the film had a total of 4 directors, though only one, Victor Fleming, was credited. He worked on the film for 4 months, and the first director worked on the film for 2 weeks, the second 3 days, and the final 10 days. There were also numerous writers who contributed to The Wizard of Oz's screenplay, with 3 being credited and 17 others contributing behind the scenes. The changes in directors and opposing ideas among producers, as well as attempting risky stunts and effects, led to numerous on-set incidents, causing delays to an already costly production. The infamous use of asbestos to create the snow in the Poppy scene is not the only instance of toxic materials being used. The original Tin Man actor, Buddy Ebsen, was hospitalized 10 days into production after suffering from a toxic reaction to the aluminum paint used to turn him into the Tin Man. His skin turned blue, and he had to spend 2 weeks in an oxygen tent. During one of the Munchkinland scenes, Margaret Hamilton, who portrayed the Wicked Witch of the West, was burned during a smoke effect. She couldn't work for 6 weeks, and when she returned to set, she had to wear gloves instead of makeup to create her green skin, because she had exposed nerves on her hands. Upon her return, an already traumatized Hamilton was asked to film another smoke effect during the skywriting scene. She understandably refused, and these scenes had to be filmed by her stunt double, Betty Danko. Danko ended up getting burned and thrown from the broom when a metal pipe attached to it, which was also coated in asbestos, exploded. She spent 11 days in the hospital with an injury to her leg, and internal damage so severe she had to have a hysterectomy. This also wasn't the first time Danko was injured on set. During the opening Munchkinland scene, when the witch appears, Danko was supposed to be essentially shot up from underground through a thin aluminum sheet. The film's choreographer was explaining to the Munchkin actors how to avoid this hole as they were dancing and moving about the set. And in his explaining how to avoid the hole, he ended up falling into it, falling through and landing on Danko. The most notable issue on the production of this film was the horrific abuse suffered by then 16-year-old Judy Garland on set. Then on the other side of the coin, we have Labyrinth, which again could be described as cobbled together, but in the best possible way. There was plenty of chaos on set, but it seemed like everyone really rolled with it and enjoyed their time making Labyrinth. Reading the names involved, both on and off screen in Labyrinth, it's surprising to consider that it didn't see mainstream success in its day and is considered a cult classic. You have a movie directed by Jim Henson, the beloved creator of The Muppets, Sesame Street, etc., and starring David Bowie, the iconic, legendary musician, and a young Jennifer Connelly in her first leading role, who went on to be a BAFTA, Academy, Golden Globe winning actress. It's written by Terry Jones of Monty Python fame, and executive produced by George Lucas, as in George Lucas, Star Wars George Lucas, and features Frank Oz, the renowned director and puppeteer, best known for portraying and helping to create the characters of Yoda, Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Gonzo the Great. It also includes numerous other talents who may not have the same name recognition, but whose work many people would be familiar with. For example, Jim Henson's son Brian, who was the lead puppeteer for Hoggle and the voice of Hoggle, as well as a key puppeteer throughout the rest of the film, went on a few years later to direct one of the most beloved Christmas movies out there, The Muppets Christmas Carol.
Brian Henson is a great director. We love working with him because he lets us off early for lunch.
The key people to focus on when looking at the making of Labyrinth and how it was cobbled together are, of course, Jim Henson, David Bowie, Terry Jones, and Brian Froud. Following the making of The Dark Crystal, Jim Henson and Brian Froud decided they wanted to make another movie in a similar style with a similar setting, but this time about goblins. Brian Froud immediately went to work creating concept art. Brian Froud left his character designs very open-ended to give more creative freedom to Terry Jones, the screenwriter, as well as the puppet designers. As Froud himself said in the Inside the Labyrinth making of documentary, "I never like to create fully finished designs because I feel that pins you down too much. We have a workshop in which we use many different talents to develop these creatures that involve a lot of technical processes. And I like the characters to emerge slowly. I feel that my role is to nurture that and to bring out the different qualities that are happening. Maybe just latch on to the happy accidents and push those a bit further." And this openness was very much appreciated by the designers, and that everyone was able to put their stamp on the look of the movie and, in turn, the story. Mike McCormick, the Goblin armor designer, described working with Froud and the independence he allowed the designers as a dialogue of creative intensity. Screenwriter Terry Jones pulled from Froud's drawings to complete the script and flesh out the story framework set by Jim Henson and Dennis Lee. As Terry Jones said on the process of writing Labyrinth, "It was wonderful. It was a strange way of collaborating because, although Brian and I never sat down to work together, it felt that that's what we were doing the whole time." And of course, the final element to cobble this story together is one of our stars and the film's songwriter, David Bowie. Jareth had originally been developed to simply be an evil goblin king, but later they decided that they wanted him to be more of a rock star. Jim Henson pitched the story to David Bowie in 1983, showing him a copy of The Dark Crystal as well as some of Brian Froud's concept art. He asked Bowie if he'd be interested in portraying Jareth, as well as writing songs for the film, and Bowie immediately said yes. When presenting the songs he'd written for the film to Henson, Bowie didn't simply provide demo tracks or even just sheet music and lyrics. He came to the table with fully produced songs. Similar to The Wizard of Oz, there were numerous technical difficulties due to the use of innovative puppetry techniques, as well as some inventive sequences involved. A number of the puppets were highly technical and required the cooperation of several people to get the movements just right. For example, Hoggle required an actress to perform his body and 4 puppeteers to coordinate his facial movements. The magic dance scene was chaotic to film, with 52 puppeteers and their 48 goblins, 8 actors in costume as additional goblins, various birds, including chickens, which were throughout the film and very troublesome, and a baby. Jareth juggling the crystals was a practical effect done by having professional juggler Michael Motion stand behind David Bowie and act as his arms. Motions he could seamlessly achieve otherwise were made more complicated by him not being able to see what he was doing. A great deal of time was spent trying to accurately capture these moments. A quote from Jim Henson that perfectly encapsulates the chaos on set is, "People say that you shouldn't work with babies, puppets, or animals, and of course, we work with puppets all the time, and I have worked with animals a little bit, but this is the very first time I've ever worked with a baby. So now I understand why people say that. Working with a baby had its problems, but then I tried directing chickens."
That chicken is not going to be a star.
Don't tell me truth hurts, little girl. 'Cause it hurts like...
Jennifer Connelly was also close in age to Judy Garland. Garland was 16 when filming The Wizard of Oz, and Connelly was 14 when filming Labyrinth. However, their on-set experiences are completely different, where Judy Garland unfortunately walked away from The Wizard of Oz with a significant amount of trauma. Jennifer Connelly had a very pleasant film experience and has spoken highly over the years on working with both Jim Henson and David Bowie, and just how respectful and professional they were. David Bowie and Jim Henson also had very kind things to say about Jennifer Connelly, as they and others on set were very impressed by her work ethic and professionalism at such a young age. Now that we've explored the similar plots between the two films, as well as some similar behind-the-scenes stories, let's look into what this whole video has been about, which is comparing the symbolism used and how they connect to Greek mythology and lead me to believe that these two settings are part of the same universe. Starting with Poppies. As I'm sure we all know, in The Wizard of Oz, as Dorothy and her friends are running to the Emerald City, the Wicked Witch casts a spell over them, causing them all, well, except the Scarecrow, to fall asleep. In Greek myth, Persephone is kidnapped by Hades while in a field of flowers collecting them with her nymph companions. Various sources, such as the Homeric hymns, list the flowers that Persephone and her companions would have been picking, but poppies aren't anywhere on that list. And that's because, in Greek mythology, poppies didn't exist yet. Poppies were created by Demeter, Persephone's mother, after Persephone's disappearance, to help her to sleep because she was so depressed at the loss of her daughter. It was the only way she could get a good night of sleep. Since the time of the ancient Greeks, poppies have been used to symbolize sleep and eternal sleep or death. There are also similar connections between the peach in Labyrinth and Persephone's story. In Labyrinth, Jareth sends one of his crystals down to Sarah disguised as a peach. Famished from her long, arduous journey, Sarah takes a bite, causing her to fall asleep and enter the romance-coded dream sequence, eventually waking up in the trash heap. Peaches have had varied symbolism across cultures and time, with the most pervasive being purity, prosperity, abundance, and fertility. In some Western cultures, it is seen as a symbol of romance, and in some Eastern cultures, it is seen as a symbol of immortality. Sarah's peach, through its symbolism, can be connected to Persephone's pomegranate. In Greek mythology, Kore ate the seeds of a pomegranate while in the underworld, ensuring her fate as Persephone, queen of the underworld. The pomegranate was local to the underworld, binding her to Hades and the underworld itself for eternity. She spends 1/4 of the year there, leading to the earth being left in a bitter cold as Demeter, her mother, refuses to allow any plant life to grow in her sorrow due to her daughter's absence. Through this myth, pomegranates came to be a pervasive symbol of life, rebirth, fertility, abundance, marriage, and immortality. The two also have etymological connections. Peach is derived from the ancient Greek word for Persian, persikos, as peaches were considered to be Persian apples. The word pomegranate has an apple connection as well. It is a Middle English word stemming from Old French and Latin, roughly translating to apple with many seeds. Now, I could go into how Glinda creating snow over the poppy field to wake Dorothy and her friends is also similar to Demeter creating winter at the loss of Persephone when she disappears and goes into sleep, or the realm of eternal sleep, as she is in the underworld. But honestly, I think even just the connections between the poppies and the peaches and how they connect to mythology, and clearly Labyrinth taking something from Ding Dong the Witch is Dead to create its world, there's just really a lot to be explored here, but I guess that's really all I have to say on that. So, surprise, I don't know how to finish this. Bye! There is a third film that has striking similarities to both The Wizard of Oz and Labyrinth, and that is the 1999 film The Adventures of Elmo and Grouchland. Now, I know this probably on its face seems a bit crazy, but hear me out. Like the plot similarities and behind the scenes similarities between The Wizard of Oz and Labyrinth, Elmo and Grouchland also shares these similarities. Labyrinth and Elmo and Grouchland have the most similarities to each other, which is unsurprising considering Labyrinth and Elmo and Grouchland are both Henson productions, though Elmo and Grouchland was made close to a decade after Jim Henson passed away. But there were still a number of people who worked on both films. Brian Henson was an executive producer on Elmo and Grouchland, and Kevin Clash, who I'll just say here is a controversial figure. I don't want to ignore that, but we're just talking about the fact that he was involved in both films. Kevin Clash was more or less the originator of the character of Elmo, and also was one of the puppeteers in Labyrinth. Elmo's introduction and early development as a character on Sesame Street lines up with the production of Labyrinth. The Elmo puppet was originally created to be a background monster, and it wasn't until a few years later, in 1984, that audience were introduced to the version of the character that we all know today. And this version came to us from Kevin Clash. Clash also performed a number of the puppets in Labyrinth, and most notably was one of the Fireys during the Chilly Down scene, aka the Water Temple of Labyrinth, which is to say that is my least favorite part of something I really love, because I'm not a fan of that scene. But anyway, he plays one of the Fireys in Labyrinth and uses an Elmo voice for this character.
Where you going ahead like that? It all began when Elmo went to bed last night.
Honestly, the similarities between Labyrinth and Elmo and Grouchland are so striking that I've often wondered if Elmo and Grouchland was meant to be a preschooler's adaptation of Labyrinth, or maybe these two movies are meant to be set in the same universe. To further explain this, let's again look at plot parallels now between the three movies. We have the story of a child, starting with a brief introduction to the child's homeworld, from their neighborhood down to their home and bedroom. After an argument with a loved one, the child is transported to another world directly from someone's home. The antagonist arrives, and we get some exposition as they introduce themselves and explain their intentions. The antagonist keeps a close eye on the child throughout their journey, trying to stop them from making it to their lair. The hero or heroes of our stories barge into the antagonist's castle for a final confrontation. The child is triumphant and is returned home, reunited with the loved one they argued with, making up with them. And I quickly just want to break down some of the more specific similarities. In Labyrinth, Sarah is angry with Toby for taking her teddy bear, while in Elmo and Grouchland, Elmo is mad at Zoe for trying to take his blanket. When he arrives in Grouchland, Elmo says,
Elmo doesn't think he's on Sesame Street anymore.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
The mayor of Grouchland is also dressed like the mayor of Munchkinland. In Labyrinth, Hoggle is largely disinterested in helping Sarah at first, and simply points out the entrance to the labyrinth, wandering off and leaving her to her own devices. Grizzy tells Elmo where he can find Huxley, and thinking she's helped enough, leaves him to make the journey on his own. The flora and the fauna in the woods of Grouchland sing Elmo an encouraging song to set him on his way, similar to Follow the Yellow Brick Road. Both Jareth and Huxley sing their villain motivation songs, Magic Dance and Make It Mine respectively, from the hearts of their lairs and with minions as backup. To me, the biggest specific similarity, Elmo is diverted and goes to the Queen of Trash's dump, reminiscent of the dump where Sarah meets the trash lady. This is honestly the point that has always made me think there was meant to be a connection between these movies. I wondered if they happened to be reusing the set from Labyrinth. However, Labyrinth was filmed in London, and Elmo and Grouchland was filmed in North Carolina. But I can't help but wonder if these dumps are meant to be the same place. Maybe we are looking at the western portion of the dump in Elmo and Grouchland and the eastern portion in Labyrinth, though I think it's wholly set within the labyrinth itself. but I don't know, I just think they are weirdly similar. And as I mentioned, there are some similarities in the behind the scenes as well. Elmo and Grouchland could also be described as a bit of a cobbled together movie. Grouchland is a bit of a cobbled together world itself. As director Gary Halverson said, it's full of wonderful contradictions, and it's got a sense of organized chaos all over it. Mandy Patinkin was the second actor cast to play Huxley, and his ad-libs and other contributions helped to develop the character far beyond what was originally written. The interludes with Bert and Ernie were added after most of the film was complete. Children became upset at a sad moment that was ultimately cut during a screening, and they included Bert and Ernie to explain that everything was going to be okay for Elmo. The inclusion of Vanessa Williams to the cast of Elmo and Grouchland is also similar to the desire to cast a rock star for Labyrinth. As Brian Henson said of casting Vanessa Williams, "We really wanted a great music talent, somebody that's really known in the music world and is a very appealing personality." So I know this isn't a super lot, maybe this is a weak argument, but I just think there are some weird similarities, and maybe it is possible that they are all connected. And one final way that they are connected is through their morals, and more specifically through the way these movies play with the idea of imagination. The three share a similar moral of finding your own power, needing to mature as you come of age, not taking your loved ones for granted, and being careful what you wish for. I could go more into the specifics of the morals, but what I'm really interested in is this concept of imagination. The Wizard of Oz film is one of, if not the prime example of the "it was all a dream" trope. In the Wizard of Oz books, it is made clear that Oz is a real place, Dorothy did really go there. However, the film leaves us with the cliffhanger of, is Oz real or isn't it? So as much as it seems defined by her waking up, it can still be questioned. On the other hand, at the end of Labyrinth, it is made very clear that everything that happened was real, that the underground was a real place that Sarah really did go to, and the friends she made there were real as well. And you may be thinking, okay, well, Sesame Street is sort of in itself a land of imagination, so within its own setting, Grouchland and Elmo's journey must be real. But that could be called into question. From very early on in the series, Sesame Street has had fun with this idea of imagination, what's real and what's not. For many years, it was assumed by other characters in the show and the audience that Big Bird's best friend, Snuffleupagus, or Snuffy, was his imaginary friend. However, it was later revealed that he is in fact real when the other residents of Sesame Street were finally able to meet him.
Oh, hello, Elmo. Pleased to meet you.
Woo! Ah, gotcha! Go, Big Bird!
However, this was such a pervasive thought that Snuffy was imaginary that even I, until researching for this video, thought he was imaginary. I brought it up to my husband. He also thought that Snuffy was Big Bird's imaginary friend, but yeah, he's actually real. The segment Elmo's World also seems to be taking the audience into Elmo's imagination. The set of Elmo's World is a crayon drawing of Elmo's apartment, presumably Elmo's interpretation of his surroundings. The only things in the apartment, aside from Elmo, that are real are his crayon and his goldfish Dorothy, which I could also get into some similarities there. Just want to throw out there, perhaps Dorothy the goldfish is a reincarnation of Dorothy Gale. Either way, I do think that that is a very intentional reference to Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, though I couldn't find anything to confirm that, but that's just my personal headcanon. In Elmo and Grouchland, it could be argued that the events of the film are entirely from Ernie's imagination. Bart and Ernie are nowhere to be seen on Sesame Street in the film. They just speak to us from a void, narrating the story and what their friends on Sesame Street are doing. Beyond the movie, audiences are never returned to Grouchland and never meet the characters that were introduced in the film again. We never see Grizzy, we never see Huxley, we never see Bug. I don't even think Grouchland as a place that exists has been mentioned. At the end of the day, these three movies are lasting expressions of imagination and creativity. As Labyrinth and Elmo and Grouchland show, even close to a century after its release, The Wizard of Oz is still beloved by audiences around the world from all walks of life. It's a story that speaks to people and inspires more art, more creative expressions. Even now, we're seeing a real resurgence of love for The Wizard of Oz with the film release of Wicked, which comes from a musical based on a book based on The Wizard of Oz. There's so much within the Oz universe that has come out over the years. It's impressive. It goes to show how timeless The Wizard of Oz and its story and its lessons are. I think the best way to encapsulate this is a quote from Jim Henson on the making of Labyrinth, where he said, "When I go see a film, I like to be happier than I was when I went in. I like a film to leave me with an up feeling, and I like a picture to have a sense of substance. I like it to be about life, about things that matter to me, and so I think that's what we were trying to do with this film, is trying to do a film that would make a difference to you if you saw it." And I can personally say these are movies that have made quite a difference in my life, that do matter to me, and are stories of substance. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, and maybe there's more to these ideas I presented that could be fleshed out, but I'd love to hear from you. Until then, we'll see you next time. Also, isn't it interesting that this is my second video in a row about a man who turns into an owl? Have I discovered a new Sharp inspiration theory? Is Sharp Jareth?
Turn back, Sarah.
Hold on.
Sarah? Sarah.
Sarah. Hey, Sarah. Hey, you told me not to let you sleep in. You wanted to record.
What are you talking about? I already did.
No, it's Saturday morning. You wanted to record on Saturday morning.
What do you mean Saturday morning? I recorded this morning, then I took a nap. What? I dreamed all of that? Fuck! That's right. My first non-Harry Potter Wizarding World Professor Sharp video, but I still found a way to bring it back.
Greedy Huxley's house on the top of Mount Pickenose.
Take an upside down left at the MC Escher stairs.